Greetings, dear listeners. Welcome to today's tale of precision, persistence, and the unexpected wisdom found in breaking routine. Settle in as I share with you the story of a man whose life was governed by the clock, until fate delivered the most unlikely of teachers. The early morning mist hung like gauze over the cobblestone streets of Pennington. From behind the half-drawn curtains of his study, Professor Edwin Hargraves observed the town stirring to life with quiet satisfaction. The mantel clock chimed 6 precisely as he adjusted his bow tie in the antique mirror, not a second early, not a moment late. Punctuality is the politeness of kings, he murmured to himself, a maxim he had lived by for all of his 6 to 7 years. Edwin's reputation for rigorous timekeeping was legendary throughout the university. Students would set their watches by his arrival at the lecture theatre. Colleagues often jested that should the professor ever arrive 5 minutes late, they would assume the apocalypse was imminent. His housekeeper, Mrs. Pembroke, laid out his breakfast with military precision. Porridge at 6:15, toast at 6:20, and tea brewed for exactly 4.5 minutes, served at 6:25. The morning paper would be pressed and folded at the correct page, awaiting his attention at 6:30. Another splendid morning, Mrs. Pembroke, Edwin remarked, glancing at his watch. And your timing is, as ever, impeccable. One can hardly work for you for 20 years without developing a sense of the clock, Professor, she replied with the faintest hint of amusement tugging at her lips. After breakfast, Edwin collected his leather satchel and ebony walking stick, then embarked on his daily constitutional to the university. The townspeople nodded respectfully as he passed, some surreptitiously checking their timepieces. Old Mr. Winters from the bakery would wave precisely at 7:05. The postman would tip his hat at the corner of Church Street at 7:12. The rhythm of Edwin's life was as constant as the tide, until, that is, the morning when everything changed. It began ordinarily enough. The clock chimed 6. Edwin adjusted his bow tie. Mrs. Pembroke served breakfast with her usual efficiency. Yet as he stepped out into the misty morning, something peculiar caught his attention. A small, bedraggled creature huddled beneath his garden gate. Edwin approached cautiously, peering down at what appeared to be a soaking wet puppy of indeterminate breed. Its enormous eyes gazed up at him with what he could only describe as imploring intelligence. "Shoo," he said firmly, gesturing with his walking stick. "Off you go." The puppy did not move. Edwin checked his watch. 7:02. He was already 2 minutes behind schedule. "I haven't time for this nonsense," he muttered, stepping around the creature and continuing on his way. He had gone perhaps 20 paces when he realized the pattering of tiny paws was following him. Turning abruptly, he discovered the puppy trotting determinedly in his wake. "This simply won't do," Edwin declared to no one in particular. "I have a lecture at 8 o'clock sharp." Nevertheless, the puppy continued its pursuit with remarkable persistence. By the time Edwin reached the university gates, he was a full 7 minutes behind schedule, and the puppy remained steadfastly at his heels. Professor Lambert, a colleague from the mathematics department, observed the peculiar procession with undisguised amusement. "Good heavens, Hargraves! Have you acquired a familiar?" "Don't be absurd, Lambert," Edwin replied tersely. "The wretched thing followed me. And now I'm significantly behind schedule. Perhaps it's a sign," Lambert suggested with infuriating cheerfulness. "The universe suggesting you might benefit from a little spontaneity." Edwin dismissed this notion with a derisive snort and hurried towards his office, hoping to shake off his unwanted companion. To his dismay, the puppy slipped through the door behind him before he could close it. "Now see here," Edwin began sternly, pointing a finger at the small interloper. The puppy sat down promptly, its head cocked attentively to one side as though awaiting instruction. A peculiar sensation stirred within the professor's chest. Despite himself, he was rather impressed by the creature's evident discipline. "At least you know how to listen," he conceded grudgingly. The puppy's tail thumped against the floor. Edwin's morning lecture proceeded with its usual methodical precision, albeit with one unscheduled addition curled discreetly beneath his desk. To his surprise, the puppy remained utterly silent throughout, attending to the discourse on 18th-century literature with what appeared to be rapt attention. When his final student departed, Edwin regarded his unexpected guest with reluctant curiosity. "You're a rather disciplined little fellow, aren't you?" he observed. The puppy, as if recognizing the compliment, sat up straighter. Over the days that followed, Edwin found himself adapting his rigorously structured routine to accommodate his new companion, whom he named Kronos after the Greek god of time. To his astonishment, Kronos proved remarkably amenable to Edwin's schedule, waiting patiently by the door at precisely 7 o'clock each morning for their walk to the university, sitting quietly through lectures, and even seeming to anticipate Mrs. Pembroke's meal timings with uncanny accuracy. "That dog," Mrs. Pembroke remarked one evening as Kronos positioned himself by his food bowl at exactly 6:45, "has adopted your ways entirely, Professor. Never seen anything like it." Edwin couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. "He appreciates the value of order and discipline, Mrs. Pembroke. Rare qualities in today's chaotic world." As weeks turned to months, however, Edwin began to notice subtle shifts in his outlook. When a sudden summer downpour delayed their morning walk by 15 minutes, he found himself more amused than annoyed. When Kronos became distracted by a butterfly during their afternoon constitutional, causing an unscheduled detour through the university gardens, Edwin surprised himself by following without complaint. "You know, Kronos," he confided as they sat together one evening by the fire, the puppy, now considerably larger, resting his head on Edwin's slippered foot, "I'm beginning to suspect that true discipline isn't merely about adhering to schedules." Kronos thumped his tail in apparent agreement. "Perhaps it's about knowing when to maintain one's course, and when to adapt with grace." The mantel clock chimed 9, signaling Edwin's traditional bedtime. For the first time in decades, he ignored it, choosing instead to remain by the fire with his loyal companion. "Another half-hour won't hurt, I suppose," he murmured, reaching down to scratch behind Kronos's ears. "After all, punctuality may be the politeness of kings, but flexibility, my dear fellow, might well be the wisdom of masters." Kronos sighed contentedly, and the once rigidly punctual professor smiled, realizing that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. And so, my friends, as our tale draws to a close, perhaps we might all take a moment to consider where in our own lives we might benefit from a little less rigidity and a touch more flexibility. Until next time, may your days be filled with both purpose and pleasant surprises.